Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ali Rafie. Hey everyone, welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. This is my first episode, so I'm really going to use this time to talk a little bit about myself, talk about my background, and really dive into why I transitioned from a sales account executive to pursue my dream of becoming a lawyer. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I was born in Redwood City, and I've been living on the peninsula my whole life. My dad's been in tech his whole life, and so I've sort of been immersed in that world for as long as I can remember. My first sales role was actually in college when I had the opportunity to work for a Y Combinator backed startup. So that was a great time working in the senior care industry at a company called GoGo Grandparent. And so what they did was they organized Lyft and Uber rides for seniors or people who didn't have smartphones. They'd call into a call center and the call center would organize that Lyft or Uber ride on their behalf. So as this was my first introduction into a sales role, it was not commission based. It was calling into retirement homes, retirement communities, and pitching them on this partnership, and also sometimes working with cities to get the service subsidized. So had a great time doing that. Both of the founders are actually mentors to me to this day. After that, I graduated college with a business degree and I started working at a company called Samsara. I had a great time working there as well. I got extremely valuable experience as I started as an SDR and then got promoted to an SMB account executive a year later, and then finally ended in a mid-market account executive position. So really nice, just sort of internal promotion career path they had. They still do that. And they were able to because they grew so fast. It was such a good company to work for, founded by Sanjit Biswas, who was a second-time founder. He'd actually created and sold Meraki to Cisco for over $1 billion previously. So I sort of got lucky stumbling into Samsara, joined when it was 300 employees. Now they're at 3,200. They have an $18 billion market cap. They IPO'd. So really a great company to sort of jumpstart my career in sales, gained a lot of valuable experience, and really just like built thick skin, cold calling, prospecting, learned how to send cold email sequences, how to copyright, things of that nature. And really grateful to have worked there. Didn't necessarily want to leave. I had a friend who was interviewing at another startup called Productive, and he actually poached me in that he reached out. The OTE was much higher than what I was currently making. And so I was just looking at that number and sort of made that transition into Productive. And it was a great company to work for. I mean, I was selling into a much more mature buyer. I was selling into the C-suite of Silicon Valley, into the fastest growing companies, selling to CIOs and CFOs. And I was a founding account executive in the mid-market segment. So I was able to sell to a lot of to a lot of Forbes Cloud 100 companies. And so that gave me a ton of like sales experience. I had to keep everything tight, learn how to make excellent decks, create a really strong business case, business proposition as to why they should actually buy Productive. And for some context, Productive was a SaaS management tool, SaaS management platform. So it was a way for companies to see how many licenses they had for certain applications. Were they over licensed? Were they underutilized? Did they need to buy more? Were they overspending? They had a really neat dashboard for that. And this industry really took off during COVID because everyone was working from home. So all these companies had to buy licenses like crazy. So I got a ton of valuable experience from there, was able to work with and close, some of these Forbes Cloud 100 companies like Reddit, Workato, Harness, Brex, Zumper, even the LA Clippers. So really appreciative of my time getting to work there, building up my network, building up that customer base. And around the time that I started at Productive was also the time when I really became interested in the general counsel role. And I was like, okay, I think I want to be a lawyer. Because when you're in sales, you're working closely with that in-house legal role. There's a lot of push-pull when you're getting to the end of a sales cycle or a deal. You are having to talk to the in-house counsel to see, hey, can I get certain things added to the contract? Can I increase this liability cap? Can we add in these promises or features that maybe we shouldn't be promising to the customer, but it's going to get the deal over the line. And so you're playing this push-pull game with the general counsel, this in-house leader, in-house counsel, where they're trying to mitigate risk, right? They don't want the company to be liable for something that could get them in trouble. And so that was when I was like, okay, this is a role I'm really interested in. Not only was I interacting with the in-house counsel at Productive, but I was also working with all of these customers, lawyers. So a lot of the times these smaller startups, maybe they didn't have procurement teams. And so you're actually negotiating the T's and C's or the MSA, the Master Services Agreement, with another company's lawyer, and the cost, of course. You're negotiating that with their lawyer. So in interacting with them, that's when I really became interested. In addition to working with sales folks, they also worked with the executives, the board, the CEO. They were actually contributing to overall company strategy in terms of what kind of products, how should we be releasing these products, what should we be promising customers. And so just being in that kind of intersection of law, business, and technology was extremely fascinating to me. At the same time, I had some friends that were in law school. What the work they were doing looked very interesting to me. And so those were kind of the two biggest things as to why I wanted to make that transition from sales to pursue my goal of becoming a lawyer. So super excited to be doing that. The next step after Productive was studying for the LSAT. So I was at Productive for roughly 2.5 years, and I knew I couldn't study for the LSAT, the law school entrance exam, while I was working in that sales role. So I had to figure that out. I had a little bit of a nest egg saved up, so I wanted to figure out how I could deploy that capital and live off that, or actually grow that capital while I was studying. And that's when I started to do a house hack, which is basically where you get someone else to pay your living expenses for you. And so what I did was buy a house with an ADU. I lived in the ADU and rented out the house on Airbnb and VRBO and Booking.com, and did roughly 6 figures in revenue just off the house, off doing the short-term rentals. So it more than covered my living expenses as I was studying for the LSAT, and also kind of started my passion for real estate investing and short-term rentals. So that's kind of the way that I was able to study for the LSAT and focus on getting into the best law school I could possibly get into if I was going to leave my successful career in sales. I wanted to make sure I could get into the best possible law school. So I was pretty set on what they call the T14. Now, as far as my plans are concerned for post law school, there's a couple of things that I've been really interested in talking with alumni and folks that have been working in what they call big law. So I think I know for a fact that I want to work in big law for at least a few years, if not work my way up to partnership, which is one of the things that really interests me, especially the business development side of things, sort of the sales customer facing side of being a partner is very fascinating to me. The other thing would be, working my way up to become a general counsel or an associate general counsel at a tech startup or a tech company or a FANG or a Fortune 100, whatever the case might be. So that's also a role that sounds extremely interesting to me. And a lot of folks go into big law for several years before doing that. Maybe they specialize in something like M&A, or they work with a certain company that poaches them from that big law firm. So that's also kind of interesting to me. And thirdly, I've been talking to a lot of folks who have started their own firms. And that's also kind of an interesting path to me that I'd want to take after getting that big law experience for, who knows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5+ years, and sort of taking that entrepreneurial route to start my own firm and specialize in something. And one of my mentors that wrote one of my letters of recommendation, he started his own firm, and that's sort of where that inspiration came from. So that's sort of my background. I want to start this podcast to really inspire folks, inspire aspiring lawyers, folks that are in law school, or even if you're a seasoned professional, you're a lawyer that's been doing it for many years. I want to bring these guests on that are leaders in the industry to talk about what was their path to actually get to the position that they're in currently. What kinds of things did they have to do? How did they really network or get into a lot of the positions that they stepped into to get to maybe becoming a partner or the general counsel of a large company. So I'm excited to interview those folks. And some of these episodes will be solo. I'll be talking about my journey. I'm obviously not even in law school yet. So I think it'll be interesting to look back on where I started and see where I end up in several years down the line as I take this journey. And so I'll be doing some solo episodes to just update, myself, update the audience, and I'm really hoping to build a community around this podcast, a really tight knit one, to the point where, we can build a community and come together and talk about some of the folks that come on to the podcast, and be inspired by them, and ultimately be the best professionals that we can possibly be. So I'm super excited. Thanks so much for listening to my backstory. Looking forward to attending Berkeley Law in August of this year. Really, truly couldn't be more excited. My next episode talks more about that journey of studying for the LSAT and then eventually getting accepted into Berkeley's binding early decision program. So that's going to be episode 2. Please consider dropping a follow or subscribing to the podcast to follow along the journey. And I will talk to you on the next episode. Thanks so much.